Hello everybody, this is ManuS and welcome back to the next part of the MTG Arena set review for War of the Spark with the second half of the black cards. Before we continue with the cards, you know the drill, hit the subscribe button, turn on the notification icon to not miss out on future content, and please consider whitelisting YouTube on your adblock to help support the content. Alright, let's take a look. So first off we have Caius Ghost Form, clearly a limited card only. Even a limited, it's not very great. You get to enchant a creature or planeswalker you control, and when the permanent dies or is exiled, you return the card to the battlefield under your control. So it basically just makes the opponent having to kill it twice. It's a bit better on planeswalkers in a way, because they die easier, and it also means if you kill them by, for example, minusing them with their minus ability, you still get them back. So it seems kind of decent with planeswalkers in limited. Not as good with creatures, and in general it seems more like a one-off filler type card at best. Nothing that I would be too excited to have in my deck usually. Then we have otep Behemoth. Pretty cool artwork, but that's about it. Just an okay limited curve drop. It's a 5-cost 4/5, which is decent for the cost, but not great. So yeah, if you're looking for a filler, for something a bit more impactful in your limited deck, this is a fine option, but nothing else. Then we have otep Reaver. It's a 2-mana 1/2 that amasses 1 when it enters the battlefield, so effectively it's like 2/3 in stats, and it's a decent amass starter. Not good enough for constructed, but in limited, if you have a bunch of amass synergies, this seems like a quite a decent 2-drop, although not that great, since on its own, being a 2/3 would be a lot better than what it is, but with enough amass, it can actually be better than a 2-mana 2/3, so that's nice. And then we have Liliana Dreadhorde General. She's a 6-mana, 6 loyalty planeswalker. As a static ability, whenever a creature you control dies, you draw a card. +1 gives you a 2/2 black zombie token, and -4 makes both players, or each player rather, even in multiplayer, sacrifice 2 creatures. So it's sort of like a soft sweeper. You can play her on 6. If the opponent has 2 or fewer creatures, you can -4, then you have a 2 loyalty planeswalker left. And even if you have creatures that you have to sack, you get to draw cards. Maybe you can even sack away like unnecessary cards, something like Land of Elves that you don't need anymore, turn them into cards, which is nice. Or you just don't have any creatures, and then you get to just like 3/1 the opponent, leaving a planeswalker behind. And the -9 is each opponent chooses a permanent they control of each permanent type and sacrifices the rest. So also a pretty powerful like game-winning ultimate there. +1 and -4 ability, both are really good. Both protect Liliana, so she's pretty good at protecting herself, which you would expect from 6-mana planeswalkers. They usually are fairly impactful, but yeah, this is kind of like a better version of the 6-mana Vraska, I would say, also more flexible because she's single color. So yeah, fairly powerful. Could see this making it into control or like slow mid-range decks as a top end potentially, like maybe as a 1 or 2 off, even in Sultai mid-range, for example, or in the sideboard. And definitely the power level is there, and in limited this is obviously like a stone cold bomb. Next we have her namesake card, Lilianas Triumph. It's a 2-mana edict, so basically just a diabolic edict, except it doesn't target the player, so it still works even if the opponent has hexproof or something, unlike with diabolic edict where that wouldn't work. Also in multiplayer it forces each opponent to sacrifice a creature, so it's better than the old diabolic edict in multiple ways. And on top of that, if you control Liliana, each opponent also discards a card. So this seems like it could actually be even relevant in modern, in black-green base mid-range decks with 3-mana Lilianas, making this a pretty decent option, at least as a sideboard card for some matchups where you need this, where you need this type of effect potentially. Although not sure if it ends up something that these decks need, but it's definitely strong enough to be an option, I would say. And yeah, in standard, this also seems like a decent removal option. It's probably actually better in standard in a way than in limited, because the creature the opponent is going to sack to this in standard more likely will be of higher value then in limited, where the opponent often has like an early drop lying around, they can sack, or even like a 1/1 amass token and stuff. So it seems pretty, yeah, borderline in limited. You still probably play it more often than not, but it's not too great. Then we have Misaka Girl. She's a 5-mana 4/4 ManuS. When she enters the battlefield, each other creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn. And whenever a creature dies that turn, each creature other than Misaka Girl gets -1/-1 until end of turn. So you can basically kind of like chain massacre stuff. If there is like a 1 toughness creature out, you just play Misaka Girl that dies. That means effectively everything else gets -2/-2 over 2 triggers. And then if there was a 2 toughness creature, this keeps continuing to a point where, depending on how the board stacks up on both sides, she just wipes the board and leaves behind a 4/4 ManuS, which is super powerful. Also because of this like controllable nature, you can kind of set her up in a way to be particularly devastating to the opponent and not to you. And also, if you play her pre-combat, you can then attack, and if the opponent can't just take all the damage, there will be blocking, which triggers Misaka Girl further and further decimates the board. So yeah, definitely kind of a cool and interesting card that has some pretty good constructed playability potential in mid-range decks and standard. And in limited, this also seems like quite the powerhouse. So if you get to set this up nicely in limited and wipe the board, or mostly wipe the board, it is super devastating, really powerful card. Then we have Sillas, the Hate Twisted, the most expensive uncommon planeswalker we've seen so far, but once again the 5 loyalty template here. Double black and 3. Whenever an opponent draws a card, Sillas, the Hate Twisted, deals 1 damage to that player, so nothing too fancy. And the -2 ability destroys target creature, but the controller of that creature draws 2 cards. That makes it reasonably flexible. You can use it to kill like unwanted low drops that are blanked and turn them into 2 cards, which is really nice. And you can also turn it into bad removal on opposing bombs. Giving the opponent 2 cards for killing their creature is something you don't want to do lightly. It is quite a big trade-off, but it's still better than losing to like a big flyer or a bomb. So having the option is nice. But all in all, I think this planeswalker isn't that great. It's pretty expensive. The ability is kind of conditional. The static ability isn't that great. It's still probably fine, and I think you usually play it in limited, but use with caution, I would say. And in constructed, it's probably not a consideration for what it does and how expensive it is. Then we have Sillas Namesake, Sillas Cruelty, 3-mana instant. Target creature gets -5/-5 until end of turn, and if that creature would die this turn, exile it instead. This card is a powerhouse. Premium common in black, amazing removal, 3 mana, kills most things, kills the big things in combat if they are too big to die to it immediately. Just really, really good common removal, not much else to say. Probably still not good enough to make it constructed, because the bar for removal is pretty high there these days, but in limited this is amazing. Next we have Price of Betrayal. For 1 black, you remove up to 5 counters from target artifact, creature, planeswalker, or opponent. This is kind of an interesting card. It provides kind of a sideboard option against Infect, which is way too narrow probably, because it has to be good enough against enough decks to kind of do enough, and then also the games have to play out often enough in a way that you don't just kind of get like 10 poison in 1 big attack. But it is an interesting removal for planeswalkers with other additional useful applications, and in a way I would argue it could almost be better in limited than the 2-mana removal that kills any amount of planeswalkers just because of its flexibility, but I could be wrong there. So yeah, fringe playable, probably more of a sideboard card against the deck with a couple of targets for it, not something you probably want to play main deck. And in constructed, more likely than not it won't be relevant, but it is cheap and it does a bunch of things, so who knows, maybe it'll find a home as a sideboard card somewhere. Then we have Shriek Diver, 3 mana, 2/1 flying, and for 1 you can give it haste until end of turn. So it's basically either a 3 mana, 2/1 flying, or a 4 mana, 2/1 flying haste, which is not bad, nothing too great. 1 toughness is a bit lackluster, but all in all seems like a decent evasive common. Then we have Sauron Thirst, another decent removal for limited, a bit steep in the color requirements with double black for a 2 mana card, but it is an instant and it deals 2 damage to target creature and you gain 2 life, making it a solid early game removal for like early drops, utility creatures and some of the smaller evasive creatures. A solid pick, but probably not a super high pick, but maybe I'm undervaluing a bit, but it is significantly worse than Shock, I would say, and the fact that it only deals with small stuff and it is hard to cast makes me think it's more like a solid common than a good common, but maybe it's better than that. Next we have Spark Harvest. As an additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice a creature or pay 4, like a black and 3. So that's pretty nice, so either it costs 1 and a creature, or a double black and 3, and you get to destroy target creature or planeswalker. So a really nice limited removal. Having the option to play it cheaper is great, and we've seen a fair share of these like 5 mana double cost removal that kill a planeswalker or a creature in this set. Normally they would only kill a creature, but in this specific set they also kill planeswalkers because there are so many and have a bit of an upside. In this case it's the added flexibility. So yeah, a very solid common removal in limited. Probably a bit worse than Obnixilis Cruelty just because of the cost, but not a whole lot since it can kill anything, a creature of any size, and also can kill planeswalkers, both things that Obnixilis Cruelty, despite its instant speed and being cheap, cannot do. So they are at a similar level. Obnixilis Cruelty probably a bit better just because of the efficiency, but this is close behind. One of the top commons in black, I would say. Then we have Spark Reaper, 3 mana 2/3. For 3 you can sacrifice a creature or planeswalker and gain 1 life and draw a card. It's an expensive ability, but you can use it instant speed, so you can use it for like jump block with a small creature and then throw it away. In response to removal, it's a decent ability to have, even though it's expensive. The base body of 2/3 for 3 is not great, but also not terrible. So for common, all in all, it seems like a decent common, a solid role player. Not constructed playable, obviously. Then we have Misaka Giant, 6 mana 4/5. When it enters the battlefield, you draw a card and you lose 1 life. Not quite as good as the old Phyrexian version that cost double black and was 4/4. Then drew you 2 cards and lost you 2 life, but still pretty good. The extra toughness makes a fair share of difference, making this match up quite a bit better against lower drops, and still replacing itself is really powerful. So yeah, 6 mana 4/5s that are basically free in terms of card economy are always great. Seems like another high quality black common to me, even though 6 mana isn't that cheap. The format would have to be like super fast, I think, for this not to be a pretty good common. Then we have Toll of the Invasion, black and 2, basically coercion in better. Target opponent reveals the hand, you choose an unland card from it, that player discards that card, and you amass 1. So it's coercion with amass 1, which makes it a whole lot better, especially in this limited format with all the amass synergies. Normally I think these cards are very unplayable, but I think this card is actually reasonably playable in a deck with amass synergies, simply because adding that 1/1 body or the potential to grow your zombie army makes it better enough that the card seems decent as like a one-off in an amass heavy deck. Next we have Unlikely Aid. For black and 1, as instant, target creature gets +2/+0 and indestructible until end of turn. So seems like a solid combat trick. Not too great. 2 mana combat tricks are always a bit iffy. But yeah, the fact that it survives the combat no matter what, and can therefore turn into a 2-for-1 or even better, and gets an attack boost to make sure it beats bigger opponents, makes it all in all a pretty good combat trick, I would say, for limited. Then we have Vampire Opportunist, a 2 mana 2/1, nothing too exciting, a bit a bit below the curve for a 2-drop, but the fact that it turns into sort of a win condition in the late game in a stall is a nice bonus. For a black and 6, each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life, so if you can just stall out the game, this can suddenly turn into a massive threat that just kind of kills the opponent without them being able to do much about it other than killing Vampire Opportunist. And having 2 drops that the opponent can't ignore in the late game is pretty good, so even though it has only 1 toughness, it seems like a decent 2-drop at least, although not a premium 2-drop. Then we have Vizier of the Scorpion. When Vizier of the Scorpion enters the battlefield, amass 1. It's a 3-mana 1/1, and zombie tokens you control have Death Touch. So it's not that great because you usually only have 1 zombie token in this format, and the bigger your amass token becomes, the less valuable Death Touch becomes. So this is one of the amass cards that is, in a way, almost better on its own than it is in an amass heavy deck, because then you're suddenly paying like 3 mana for 1/1 to put a counter on your probably medium-sized zombie army, or start your soon medium-sized zombie army that then has Death Touch, which actually doesn't do that much once it reaches a certain size. So yeah, pretty solid on its own. Also more solid if you have a couple of like amass 1 things, so you can just kind of aggressively trade the token away, then amass new to make tokens. But in an amass heavy deck that kind of wants to build a bigger zombie army, this is actually not that great of a deal, I would say. But all in all, it's a fairly good card. And last but not least, we have Raska's namesake card, Raska's Finisher, a black and 2, 3/2, and when it enters the battlefield, destroy target creature or planeswalker an opponent controls that was dealt damage this turn. So this is actually pretty nice, especially the planeswalker part. Like sometimes you will get like small damage in on a planeswalker, but far from enough to kill it, especially against planeswalkers that can tick up. And then just getting a damage in, playing this and killing the planeswalker is super strong. 3 mana 3/2 is a solid baseline. So even without the text, it would be an okay filler these days. It's a very common stat line that these limited formats are built around. I talked about this before. And yeah, this ability is actually pretty good. And in the past we saw something like 4 mana 3/3 with this ability, but only on creatures. And this, having 1 toughness less, but also costing 1 mana less and being able to kill planeswalkers is really good. So this seems like actually a pretty good common. One of the better commons in black, I would argue. Have to see how it plays out in the end. But on paper, this looks pretty strong for, yeah, a 3 mana 3/2 common. So yeah, that wraps up the second half of the black cards. Tomorrow we will continue with the red cards. I'll probably get in some chops with the set in sealed on MTG Arena. So if you want to catch me streaming some War of the Spark sealed later, keep an eye out on my Twitch and my social media channels. I'll post when I go live after I'm done with the video and took care of some other stuff. So yeah, hope to see you guys on my stream later. Let me know in the comments what you think. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button, share it with your friends. Subscribe to the channel for more. Don't forget to turn on the notification icon so you get the notification as soon as I upload new stuff. And yeah, please consider whitelisting YouTube on your adblock. That really helps us content creators a lot. It's a great way to support us for free. That's it again for this time. I'm your host ManuS. I thank you for watching, and I see you next time. Bye.